Welcome to our video on the top 10 richest people in history. Throughout history, there have been many individuals who have amassed enormous wealth and left a lasting impact on the world. From kings and emperors to entrepreneurs and business tycoons, these individuals have made a significant impact on the world through their wealth and power. In this video, we will take a look at the top 10 richest people in history and explore their lives, their wealth, and their legacy. So sit back, relax, and get ready to learn about some of the most wealthy and powerful individuals to ever live. This ranking of the richest people of all time is based on hours of interviews with academic economists and historians. To read more about how the order was determined despite the difficulty of comparing wealth across a wide range of time periods and economic systems, read this. But for now, suffice to say that the following is a rigorous but highly debatable attempt to list the wealthiest historical figures in order of their economic influence. 10. Genghis Khan. Genghis Khan is undoubtedly one of the most successful military leaders of all time. As leader of the Mongol Empire, which at its height stretched from China to Europe, he controlled the largest contiguous empire in history. However, despite his great power, scholars say Genghis never hoarded his wealth. On the contrary, the Khan's generosity was key to his influence. One of the bases of his success is sharing the spoils with his soldiers and other commanders. Genghis still received his share of the spoils, but that hardly made him rich. He built no palace for himself or family, no temple, no tomb, and not even a house, says Weatherford. He was born in a wool jur, and he died in a wool jur. At death, he was wrapped in felt like any common person and then buried. 9. Bill Gates. As the richest living person, Bill Gates' wealth is refreshingly easy to determine. As of this year, Forbes estimates the Microsoft founder's net worth at $78.9 billion. That's about $8 billion more than Zara co-founder Amancio Ortega, the second richest person in the world. 8. Alan Rufus, aka Alain the Red. The nephew of William the Conqueror, Rufus joined his uncle in the Norman Conquest. He died with £11,000 according to Philip Beresford and Bill Rubenstein, authors of The Richest of the Rich, which they say amounted to 7% of England's GDP at the time. That would amount to $194 billion in 2014 dollars. Alan already held some property in Rouen, the capital of Normandy, and was Lord of Richmond in Upper Normandy before September 1066. In 1066 or 1067, William of Normandy assented to the gift by Alan Comes et Alan Rufus to Stowen de Rouen of the Church of Saint Sauveur without Rouen and of the nearby Church of Saint Croix des Pelletiers, which had been his gift to Alan. 7. John D. Rockefeller. Rockefeller began investing in the petroleum industry in 1863, and by 1880 his Standard Oil Company controlled 90% of American oil production. According to his New York Times obituary, Rockefeller was valued at about $1.5 billion based on a 1918 federal income tax return and estimates of his overall fortune, the equivalent of almost 2% of U.S. economic output that year according to data compiled by Measuring Worth. The U.S. did not keep official records on national income until 1932. 6. Andrew Carnegie. Rockefeller gets all the press, but Andrew Carnegie may be the richest American of all time. The Scottish immigrant sold his company, U.S. Steel, to J.P. Morgan for $480 million in 1901. That sum equates to about slightly over 2.1% of U.S. GDP at the time, giving Carnegie economic power equivalent to $372 billion in 2014. Carnegie's father, William Carnegie, a handloom weaver, was a chartist and martyr for working men's causes. His maternal grandfather, Thomas Morison, also an agitator, had been a friend of William Cobbett. During the young Carnegie's childhood, the arrival of the power loom in Dunfermline and a general economic downturn impoverished his father, inducing the Carnegies to immigrate in 1848 to the United States, where they joined a Scottish colony of relatives and friends in Allegheny. 5. Joseph Stalin. Stalin is an uncommon figure in modern economic history, a dictator with absolute power who also controlled one of the largest economies in the world. While it is virtually impossible to separate Stalin's wealth from the wealth of the Soviet Union, his unique combination of economic might and complete control of the USSR lead multiple economists to nominate him as one of the richest people of all time. While that money didn't belong directly to Stalin, he had the ability to leverage Soviet economic might for any reason he chose. He had enormous power, and through his power he could have anything he wanted, says George O. Lieber, a professor of history at the University of Alabama at Birmingham. He controlled 1/6 of the land surface of the planet without any checks or balances. Does that make Stalin rich in the traditional sense? Lieber isn't so sure. Was he among the wealthiest men? The professor wonders. I suppose if you want to stretch the definition of wealth, but it was not his wealth. He controlled the wealth of the country. Even so, it's hard not to include Stalin on a list of the most economically powerful people in history. His wealth might be uncertain, but there's no question the premier's personal economic influence is unrivaled in recent history. 4. Akbar, the greatest emperor of India's Mughal dynasty. Akbar controlled an empire that accounted for about 1/4 of global economic output. Fortune's Chris Matthews cites the late economic historian Angus Maddison, who speculates India's GDP per capita under Akbar was comparable to Elizabethan England, but with a ruling class whose extravagant lifestyle surpassed that of the European society. 3. Emperor Shenzong. China's Song dynasty, 960–1279, was one of the most economically powerful empires of all time. According to Professor Ronald A. Edwards, a Chinese economic historian of the Song dynasty at Tampking University, the nation accounted for between 25% and 30% of the world's economic output during its peak. The empire's wealth came from both its technological innovations and extreme skill at tax collection, which Edwards says was hundreds of years ahead of European governments. The professor also noted the Song dynasty's government was highly centralized, meaning the emperor held enormous control over the economy. 2. Augustus Caesar. Not only was Augustus Caesar in charge of an empire that accounted for 25% to 30% of the world's economic output, but according to Stanford history professor Ian Morris, Augustus at one point held personal wealth equivalent to 1/5 of his empire's economy. That fortune would be the equivalent of about $4.6 trillion in 2014. For a while, Morris adds, Augustus personally owned all of Egypt. That's hard to top. 1. Mansa Musa. Mansa Musa, the king of Timbuktu, is often referred to as the wealthiest person in history. According to Ferrum College history professor Richard Smith, Musa's West African kingdom was likely the largest producer of gold in the world, at a time which gold was in especially high demand. Just how rich was Musa? There's really no way to put an accurate number on his wealth. Records are scarce, if non-existent, and contemporary sources describe the king's riches in terms that are impossible for the time. Some tales of his famous pilgrimage to Mecca, during which Musa's spending was so lavish that it caused a currency crisis in Egypt, mention dozens of camels each carrying hundreds of pounds of gold. Smith says 1 year of Malian gold production probably generated about a ton. And there you have it, the top 10 richest people in history. From ancient kings and emperors to modern-day business tycoons, these individuals have amassed unimaginable wealth throughout their lives. While their fortunes may seem staggering, it's important to remember that money can't buy happiness. Nevertheless, that their stories serve as a reminder of the power of hard work, determination, and a bit of luck. Thank you for watching, and be tuned for more top 10 lists. That's all for today. So don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe to our channel to stay updated on the latest videos. Share this video with your friends and leave a comment with your thoughts on the topic. We're constantly uploading new videos, so make sure to check back often for updates. See you in the next video.